The Crypt, a spooky Salmonweird short story for Christmas. Jowan waited for Carl to enter the church's side room from the nave before placing the mug of tea on the table. Carl leaned forward and swept up the mug just as Jowan clattered the generously loaded plate of speculoos next to the mugs. "Don't go eating them all at once," Jowan laughed, noticing Carl's eyes widen at the biscuits. "Oh, don't tempt me," Carl said. "Moving that tree was hungry work." "I thought Cato was coming to help you. Plus, you did tell me you could do it on your own." "I did. You're right. I wish I'd left it and asked you to open the side door to let me come through that way." Carl gestured into the vestry. "I presume that's where the door leads?" Jowan frowned. "Side door? There's no way out through the vestry." "Where does the door lead then?" Jowan's frown deepened. "Which door? The church has 2 entry points, the west end and the south side. There are no others." "Yes, the small one," said Carl. "I think with a bit of pushing and shoving, I could have got through there." "Oh, that." Jowan's face dropped. "Did I say something wrong?" Carl asked. "It's not a side entrance at all. I'd quite forgotten about it, and now you've reminded me. I want to forget it all over again." Jowan took a large sip of tea and grabbed the speculoos. "Then what is it?" asked Carl. "It's a crypt," Jowan said flatly. "Wow, like a real medieval crypt? Have you ever been down there?" Jowan grunted. "My guess from how white your face just turned is that your answer is yes. I'd also guess it's an experience you'd rather not repeat. Am I right?" Jowan leaned forward and placed the teacup gently on the table. It rattled as if in warning. "Yes." "Well, are you going to tell me? I'm in no rush to leave, and the tree can wait." Jowan rubbed his chin, shook his head. "On my own head be it." "Ah, if it isn't my old friend, Brother Jowan," the old man embraced Jowan enthusiastically. "Father Perrin, it is good to see you again. I had to see it to believe it was my old friend." "Oh, how long has it been?" "I believe 6, or maybe even as many as 8 seasons have passed." The man shook his head. "Ah, the years fly by, don't they? What news of St. Michael's? I know it is not far, but—" Father Perrin gestured to the village in the valley before him. "I have my work cut out here in Salmonweird." Jowan smiled. "The monastery is a den of calm and silence." Father Perrin threw his head to the sky and laughed. "Why do I not believe you, Jowan? And the abbot, he is well?" "We are helping where we can, but this Black Death—" Jowan shook his head. "The abbot is well, though, and sends his kind regards." The priest grinned. "Remind him he still owes me a cut of venison on your return." "That I shall," Jowan sighed. "I was told the plague now has reached the far west, and I am ready to help." Father Perrin put his hand to Jowan's chest. "Eager, Brother Jowan? Take some rest. You've had a long trip." Yes," Jowan said. "It was a long morning. 14 miles do not pass quickly. Nevertheless, I am keen to begin." "I'm sure you are, but so far our sick are few in number. And you will need your rest and strength if things take a turn for the worst. I strongly suspect they will." "How many are sick?" "Precisely 5, said Perrin. 3 children, 2 adults. The children are cousins. They have all received their bloodletting and restricted their homes to do penance as we speak." Good, said Jowan. "I see it is all in hand for now. Is there anything you need me to help you with now?" Perrin clapped Jowan on the back. "There is one job I was rather hoping to do this season, but now the plague is in the village. I fear I may never do it." Jowan nodded. "If there is anything I can help with, Father Perrin." Yes, there is a small crypt beneath this church. I've yet to visit and I've only recently acquired the key. Are your knees up to it? Father Perrin gave Jowan a playful look. My knees are as good as they ever were. I will get started right away. No, you won't. How long has it been since you've eaten anything, Jowan? Jowan held his stomach. Too long. Jowan slid the heavy iron key into the lock and gave it a turn. It groaned, resisted, and after a few forceful turns, unlocked with a clunk. Jowan gripped the handle tightly and gave a tug. The door came free, swinging open to reveal a flight of steps, disappearing towards and then into a thick black blanket. Dust danced, enticing him forward. He unhooked a burning lamp from the wall and stretched it before him into the dark. The orange glow did nothing more than light a few more steps. Watching where he placed his feet, Jowan took the first careful step onto the stone. Using the wall for balance, he took a second step towards the darkness. A cold wind came from the dark depths, rounding the corner and cascading up the steps towards him. Jowan. It was gone in an instant. He turned around, looking back towards the light. Father Perrin? The priest did not appear, though. Is this another of your jokes? When the priest did not answer, Jowan continued. The first flight ended at a wall. From there, the steps took a right turn. Jowan stopped there to peer into the darkness. Tiny orange sparks gravitated away from the torch as he thrust it into the void. A shape loomed at him, tall and broad, a statue or an upright tomb. Heavy musk hung on the air, a cold and wet, sealed for decades, now released. With a sigh, Jowan took a step onto the second and final, short flight of steps. These were steeper than the longer flight, and Jowan took care to lower himself carefully into the chamber. The darkness enveloped the room. His eyes adjusted enough that he could make out other shapes. Aged wooden boxes stacked neatly along the walls. Most misshapen, likely broken and rotted with age and with damp, no doubt. Jowan headed for a wall protrusion and slipped a torch into the hook. The light barely penetrated the darkness now. Needing more light, Jowan returned to the surface to collect another torch and his writing materials. Expecting to see only one torch on his return, Jowan was surprised to see not one, but 4 torches, one on each side of the crypt. The second was directly opposite where he placed his own torch. The other 2 were placed either side of the 2 pillars above, which was a long stone creating a simple doorway. Inside the stone structure was a small featureless door. The right side had strange carvings at eye level running down no longer than about 12 inches. Lines spaced closely together, followed by a gap, then more lines tightly packed together. Jowan reproduced some of the parchment, then turned his attention to the boxes. Most were broken and contained what looked like soil, dirt. Even in the lamplight he could tell it was rich, dark soil. It had a peculiar smell, as though fresh, which couldn't have been true, as Father Perrin had been Salmonweird priest for 5 years and claimed never to have been down there. Jowan rooted around inside several of the boxes, determining the fact there was nothing in them but this good quality soil. The other side of the chamber proved much the same. Jowan. Jowan. The voice came from the doorway with the strange scratches. Like before, a chill wind passed over him, out of the chamber, and was gone. Jowan turned to the door with the strange markings, and it closed gently just as he turned. Strange, he had not seen it open. His heart skipped a beat. Whoever that is, he said weakly, this is not entertaining. But there was no reply. Jowan approached the door. Sir, madam, you should not be down here. This is sacred ground. Jowan pushed the door, but it did not move. Jowan. Jowan. This time, the wind, carrying the voice, came from behind him. Jowan turned and caught sight of a figure. He was about to cry out when Father Perrin spoke. Jowan, is everything all right? Jowan relaxed. Father Perrin, I was just... He gave the door a quizzical look. This door. It opened a few moments ago and closed quickly. I cannot seem to get it open again. Perrin approached the stone upright slab. Something caught his eye and he reached out to touch the lines. Ah, I believe this is Ogham. Jowan frowned. What is that? Ogham? The ancient language of the Irish. Well, what is it doing here in Cornwall? Well, scholars say there are examples in Cornwall and Western England. Wales too. I confess that this is the first I've seen, but I recognised it instantly. Jowan took a nervous step back. Then this is a pagan tomb? Oh, that is possible, but it's also just as likely a Christian soul is at rest behind there. He gestured at the boxes. What else is here? Just dirt in boxes. Dirt. Dirt, Jowan repeated, and it seems rich soil for growing. We could perhaps use it in the church grounds to grow healing herbs. For the Black Death? Perrin scratched his chin. Yes, bring it up. I will find you some young men to help you. No need, there are 10 or maybe 12 boxes at most. By the time you find a lad you could guilt or bribe to do it, I will have finished. Besides, they're in such poor state, I wouldn't want a clumsy young lad dropping the soil everywhere. Perrin laughed. If you insist, Jowan, please. Fetch me if you need any help. He disappeared up the stairs, leaving Jowan alone. Jowan carried the crates up the stairs and stacked them neatly against the church wall. Despite the wood rotting and warped, each was held together with a metal frame which helped keep them in place. While buckled, they did not give way on the journey. Jowan re-entered the crypt and descended the steps ready to collect the final crate. But at the bottom, he stopped. The door to the inner crypt was wide open again. Jowan. He took a tentative step forward. No light came from the chamber, nothing but blackness beyond. Torch smokes danced in the room. The more he looked, the less natural the smoke seemed, twining in the centre of the crypt to hurtle towards and through the now open door. Jowan crossed the crypt, but stopped short of entering the second chamber. The smoke gravitated towards him, circling his head and blurring his vision. Something moved in the inner chamber. It looked like a figure. Sir, or my lady, come out of there this instant. Jowan grabbed a torch from the wall and marched bravely through the open door and into the second chamber. But it was empty. The door slammed shut behind him. Jowan turned, startled, and raced to the door, but it had already closed, sealing his exit. Jowan tried to get a hand grip on the door to pull it, but his fingers would not slide into the gap. Remembering that he couldn't push it open from the other side, he tried pushing it from the inside, but the door still would not open. Jowan! The voice was directly behind him this time. He thought it was the voice of a child, but when he turned, the figure seemed to be that of a young woman. She had her back to him. The room was so dark. Jowan pointed the torch towards her. He gasped. The girl's pale grey arms were covered in long healed scars, welts, gnarled veins. Long bony fingers didn't so much press to her face as clasp. Buried in a mat of hair, as wild as seaweed tossed to the shore by a storm and dumped where they rested. Please, came her disembodied voice. Please. Young lady, Jowan moved closer. She sobbed. You can't take them. Take what? You can't take them! Her head snapped quickly to face Jowan. Her face too was covered in welts and scars, skin pale, grey, almost blue. Her eyes, milky white, bore through Jowan's skull. Mouth widened into a sneer, her brown tongue flicked against ashen grey teeth. You can't take them, Jowan! She took a menacing step forward. What? Jowan cried. Take what? He backed hastily towards the door, the spectre of the woman advancing, repeating her statement. You can't take them, Jowan! You can't take them, Jowan! He tripped and fell backwards. His head knocked on the door. His feet slid forward to land on his backside, propped against the closed door. She loomed over him, such a small-built woman, yet from his prone position she was like a giantess, ready to crush an insignificant prey. She knelt, silently, gracefully, bringing her cold, grey eyes to meet his. You can't take them, her voice gurgled. It was barely a whisper. Take what? Please, tell me! Her face was now less than an inch away. He could feel the stench of the dusty, dry meat from her mouth as she sucked air in and out of ancient, rancid, dead lungs. My children, she gurgled and pulled back. Bring me my children! She brought her hand to her face and slowly reached out and touched Jowan's. He recoiled in horror, not wanting the inevitable touch of cold, dead flesh. He wanted to be far away from here, out of the chamber, out of the crypt, above ground, to safety, in light, in the church. Safe. He shrank against her bony finger, trying to slide away beneath her tattered, rag-covered body to find a way out. Her finger moved above his head, touched the door, and it opened. Realising his chance, Jowan scrambled backwards and, when far enough away, turned over and stumbled to his feet. He charged across the crypt's main room and hurtled up the steps, only to collide with Father Perrin. Whoa, easy, Jowan. I was about to offer you some small beer. Jowan grabbed his robe. Perrin, we've got to put it back. All of it. What? The soil. Perrin scratched his head. How peculiar. I was about to inform you of the same thing. Why? Jowan grabbed the priest's robes. Tell me, why? Perrin looked down at Jowan's hand. You forget yourself, Brother Jowan. Calm yourself and have some beer. Then we will put it all back together. No, we can't wait. Jowan grabbed the first crate. Please help me. I will explain as we do it. What is the rush? It's only human bone. A shiver passed down Jowan's spine. Human bone? Yes, said Perrin unconcerned. We only noticed it when we emptied the first crate. Best put them back. Allow these children their rest. Children? Jowan snapped. Yes, Jowan, what has got into you? Jowan, what has got into you? These are human remains. I don't know why we didn't see it straight away, but now we do. There was no harm done. We can put them back where we found them, pray and chant for their souls when we've finished. No, they go back now. There is no time to waste. All right, Jowan, as you wish. It took them a full hour to carefully move the boxes back below ground. In that time, it grew dark and began raining again, making the steps slippery as water cascaded down the steps to collect in the crypt. Jowan was relieved to see the inner crypt door closed and the ghastly woman no longer present. Jowan took the last crate, excusing the priest and requesting he prepare the beer he'd promised. Jowan waited in the crypt, watching the door to the inner chamber, but it remained closed for the entirety of the move. He waited with breath held, listening for something, anything. But he could hear only the gentle sound of rain tapping on the stone outside. I trust you are now satisfied, he said shakily. Your children are returned? But the door did not open. No wind, no sound came. I take your silence as agreement. Now go, leave us in peace, and be at rest. He hastened up the steps as quickly as he could and slammed the crypt door. Jowan slipped the chamber pot back under his bed and swung his legs around to lie back on the straw. The uneven shutters of the window opposite the bed allowed a thread of silver through to hit the wall behind him. He peered up to see the moonlight illuminate the crucifix, and it gave him comfort, of course. Knuckles rapped at the door. With a sigh, Jowan climbed out of bed, grateful for the heat still emanating through from the floor below. Jowan lifted the latch, expecting to see Father Perrin, but his smile froze to his face and then dropped when he saw the small landing was empty. He stepped out and peered over the stairs, but Father Perrin was not there. Perrin, he said, are you there? When the priest did not answer, Jowan returned to his room and closed the door gently. Jowan! The wind. That wind again. It came through the gap between the shutters, passed over him and was gone. With a whimper, Jowan leapt onto the bed and knelt before the crucifix, still lit by the silver moonlight, and he began praying. He squeezed his eyes shut, muttering in Latin, repeating the words over and over until his voice grew hoarse. Until he stopped chanting, he remained there, on the bed, hands clasped in prayer. The only sound he could hear was his own breath, eventually subsiding to calm. Finally relaxing, Jowan turned and lay on the bed, crossed his arms over his chest and took a deep breath, willing his heart and his breathing to calm further, to allow him to sleep. And something passed before his face, something dark. Had the moonlight finally moved too far that the room could no longer enjoy its light? Jowan opened his eyes to take a last look at the moonlight before returning to his slumber. And there she was. She stood before the shutter, blocking the light. "What do you want?" Jowan whimpered. "I did what you asked." She took a step forward, then another, and another, until she was by the side of the bed. She opened her mouth, a long, deep, gurgling scream penetrating the air. Jowan placed his hands over his ears. "Please stop!" She moved closer. Jowan screamed. The woman pushed her tortured grey face towards Jowan's. "I want my children! I want my children! I want my children! I want my children!" she screamed. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Jowan asked. Carl laughed. When Jowan realised what he'd said, he laughed right along with Carl. "You know what I mean, Carl." "That's a strange story you have there, Jowan. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of M.R. James, but the only ghosts I know are not scary." And he grinned. "M.R. James? Let me lend you some of his works, but after the story you just told me, read with the caution or the light on." Jowan nodded thoughtfully and grinned. "I don't know if the ghost stories would scare me now that I am one. Perhaps I should borrow them when I finish Mr. Dickens' work." "You'd be welcome, of course. Need more help? Only I promised Cass I would video chat with her this evening." "No, that's quite all right. I will summon the choir to help me decorate. Go, enjoy quality time with your daughter." Jowan finished the last of his tea and entered the silent church nave. Carl had placed the tree neatly on the ground along the north side. Jowan contemplated it, gauged its length, and let his gaze wander through the church for an ideal spot to place it. The west end next to the main door did not seem wide enough. "I think," Jowan said out loud, "maybe next time the south entrance?" He strolled to the door, but spotted the small leaflet table. He turned it around and shifted it to the right. "Yes, I think that will do right here." He bent down, noticing the electrical socket. "And the lights we can plug in here. Yes." "Jowan." He froze as the wind passed through the church. Jowan slowly stood up and turned to his left, wanting, but not wanting to see her. She was back. There she was at the high end. She stood before the altar, hands placed before her, the face, the ghastly grey face, sneering at the monk. "Where are my children, Jowan? Where are my children? I want my children. I want my children. I want my children. I want my children."